Where a judge has denied bond for the woman accused of killing a new bride in a DUI crash back in April. Jamie Lee Komoroski is charged with reckless homicide resulting in death. Also, she's charged with 3 counts of felony DUI after allegedly colliding with a golf cart that was carrying a couple of newlyweds and 2 others.
The new bride was killed while the groom suffered severe injuries, and a toxicology report later revealed that Komoroski's blood level was 3 times the legal limit in the state. Well, Court TV lead anchor Vinnie Politan has more on the background of this tragic case.
Weddings are a time of celebration. Family and friends come together, supporting 2 people beginning a new chapter of their lives together. On April 28, 2023, Eric and Samantha Hutchinson were ready to begin that new chapter, but their story took an unexpected and devastating turn when an alleged drunk driver crashed into them after their wedding, severely injuring Eric and killing Samantha.
And Mom looks at us and says, something happened to Sam. She knew it and she felt it in her gut.
While Eric and Sam were preparing for their wedding day, court documents say Jamie Komoroski set off on a day of bar hopping. She began here at El Gallo Bar and Grill, then made her way to Folly Beach, making stops at 3 other establishments, consuming beer, tequila shots, and other shots of liquor. By the end of the night, police reported Jamie's blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the legal limit. When police arrived on the scene, one officer says he could smell the odor of alcohol coming from Jamie, and when asked on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being completely sober, she stated she was at an 8. The officer also claimed he helped Jamie stand on her feet because she was very unsteady.
She made the conscious decision to get in her vehicle way over the legal limit, and she killed my sister.
As Sam and Eric left their wedding reception on a golf cart driven by his brother-in-law and nephew, Komoroski was reaching speeds of 65 miles per hour, blowing past the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit postings, and the result would be a catastrophic collision. Eric Hutchinson spoke about the tragedy with ABC News.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. That night going from an all-time high to an all-time low. It's pretty rough to try to comprehend. I remember waking up just kind of foggy, out of sorts, and I could see my mom's face, and you could just tell something was wrong. And
Komoroski's defense is seeking to release their client on bail and enter her into rehab, claiming in the motion she, quote, struggled with alcohol dependence, depression, and anxiety. Reports claim in jailhouse calls, Komoroski says she feels like a terrible person and her life is over, but also wants to issue an apology, and the crash was a freak accident. Komoroski is charged with vehicular homicide and 3 counts of felony DUI. In Aaron's interview with ABC News, he addressed Komoroski.
She's still an amazing human being that should not have been taken.
Oh, so hard. Today, we heard from the parents of Samantha Miller, the victim in this case. During the hearing, they were arguing why the defendant should stay behind bars. Both, as you might imagine, were quite emotional.
I'm Sam's mom. I've known Sam longer than anybody in this courtroom. And yes, the defendant made the conscious decision to get into her vehicle after drinking all day and take away my daughter. So I do believe she's a danger to the community, because I wouldn't want anybody else to go through this. It's torn apart our family. Other families, it's like, you didn't, I'm sorry, she didn't just kill my daughter. She killed all of us. Somebody asked me the other day how I'm feeling. Funny question, right? Ask any mother how they're feeling when their daughter gets killed suddenly. And I do know that she's had prior court dates that she did not show up, and therefore a risk for flight is definitely in place. So I would recommend that she stay where she's at until the trial. I just want to talk about one other thing, and I know that's not what it's about, but I just want to give y'all the picture of 428 at 10 o'clock when we were notified of the accident. And get out of the car, like Mandy said, running down the streets, nothing but sirens. And we were told that everybody got taken to the hospital. And then we go over there and stand there for 3 or 4 hours till almost 3 in the morning. And then my husband calls and said, Sam's still here. She's still on the street because she got killed. If you haven't experienced that moment, I wish on nobody, but all I can say is one person is responsible for tearing our lives apart. And a community, our community of Charlotte, where she's from, is torn apart. So thank you for your time.
I would give anything to hug my daughter again. Anything. They're gonna, if they set her a bond, they can probably afford it. And they're gonna get to hug her and to hold their daughter. I just wish and pray that we all do the right thing because the wrong thing was done. If I had done this and said I got out on bond, they'd ask to revoke the passport. I assume that's one thing, because if not, if it was me, I'd be going. Your Honor, I just pray and hope that you can see our side of the family. We're torn. We're torn apart. We're never going to get a hug again. Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, we also heard from Miller's siblings at the hearing. Here's some of what they had to say.
I think that the defendant is clear danger to the community. I mean, it's hard for me to say or believe that she made those kind of reckless decisions just because of alcohol. I think that driving over 60 miles per hour on narrow, pitch black, pedestrian-filled streets in Bali, I mean, it's beyond reckless. It almost feels like intention to hurt somebody. I don't think that she can be trusted to be responsible to show up to court or to not hurt anyone else or to, not drink. I think she should be held without bond. And I think if she gets out, she will hurt somebody else. Just don't think that she can be trusted not to with what she's already shown.
I spoke at the first bond hearing 12 hours after the defendant killed my sister. And it is just as hard to stand here today, only 3 months later, and the defendant is a danger to the community, to society, because that could have been my daughter. And now they don't get their Auntie Sammy. And I have to explain to them every day when the sirens go off. And I think about that time running down the street, screaming my sister's name, because it was a conscious decision to drink. It was a conscious decision to get behind the wheel. And as my brother mentioned, going 65 in a 25 before drinking is a decision.
All right, we want to welcome our guest still with us this hour, former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. And Nima, I personally think not allowing her out on bond was the right decision, because the problem with the DUI, I think the sibling said it best, the brother, hey, she could do it again. We don't know what her experience is with alcohol, but I think it's a risk. But what are your thoughts?
Well, actually, I got to say, I was surprised because when you're looking at bond, there is a presumption of bond unless someone's a risk of flight or a danger to the community. Here's someone, of course, who killed someone, is potentially a danger. But typically, in these types of DUI, vehicular manslaughter cases, judges do allow some type of bond. Obviously, you know, they're going to look at the defendant's criminal history. Is this someone that has had a prior DUI or DWI? Is this someone that's at risk of reoffending? And again, as a prosecutor, I think it's always to the prosecution's advantage to have someone in custody. They're much more likely to plead guilty. You know, folks sometimes have a difficult time voluntarily pleading and surrendering. And I'm not saying that's a reason to keep someone in custody, but defense lawyers, of course, like to have their clients out. That helps them prepare for trial and so forth. But, you know, usually in these types of cases throughout the country, there's no significant criminal history. Judges do allow bond in this types of cases.
Yeah, I agree with that, Nima. But in this particular instance, you know, they're allowed to look at the nature and circumstances of the crime, which I think are particularly heinous in this case, although, as you mentioned, the charge is only reckless vehicular homicide. She's also charged with 3 counts of driving under the influence causing great bodily harm. And normally you would see it, and there were some reasonable conditions set forth by her attorneys, that being that she attended a rehabilitation program. They admitted that she's had years of alcohol dependence and depression and other issues, so we know those are there, that she remained under her mother's supervision. She has definitely family all around her. She would no longer have access to vehicle or alcohol, and that she was willing to be under house arrest during that time. Those are some reasonable suggestions by the defense. Do you think the public nature, the publicity around this case might have had something to do with the judge's decision?
You know, Michael, I do think that may have a look. You know, judges are ordinary people. In certain states, they're subject to recall or they have to run for re-election. So it's impossible for ordinary human beings, I don't care if it's a prosecutor, defense lawyer, juror, not to be affected by the media attention. But I mean, you nailed it, you know, and obviously every state's different, you know, but on the federal side, you know, bond is appropriate unless there's no condition or combination of conditions that can ensure the defendant's appearance at trial. That's really what it's all about. So, you know, if you're talking about a DUI, you can have someone that surrenders their driver's license. You can have someone that needs an interlock ignition device. That means they have to blow into a vehicle before it can even start. So there's a lot that you can do if you're a defense attorney to try to convince the court and a judge that this defendant will not reoffend, will obey all laws, and will appear at future court proceedings. That's what bond is there really to do. And, you know, you see all this talk about bail reform and so forth. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if a case like this, you know, this goes up on appeal and the appellate court looks at this and says, you know what, the trial judge made a mistake, because I think there is some bond number in terms of a monetary amount and conditions that would guarantee this defendant to appear in trial.
And I do understand that from all accounts they could likely pay a bond that is set under conditions, but that the resources are there. That's not always the case. And I agree with you. I think it might be appealed, but in the alternative, give us a little bit of legal education, Nima, about what an attorney can do if they down the road say, okay, now she's been a model citizen in jail and she's done a rehab program in jail. Can they do a renewed motion for bond or not?
Absolutely, Ashley. And sometimes you see it on both sides, right? Someone's out on bond, they're not complying, and the state will come in and try to revoke the bond and remand that individual into custody. And on the defense side too, you will have defense lawyers come and they'll propose, you know, individual sureties. They'll propose a higher bond amount, and to try to convince the court that this individual is deserving of bond. On the former example, we're dealing with it right now with the FTX case, Sam Bankman-Fried. He was out on bond. The federal government is saying, well, hey, here's someone who's tampering with witnesses. Here's someone who's obstructing justice. His bond should be revoked. So this is not something that's permanent. It's something that's fluid, and it doesn't prejudice defense lawyers from either going up on appeal or trying to renew that motion before the same judge.
Nima, what I like about what this judge did, because the concern for most defense attorneys is that, you know, you're innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
You don't want this person
Fair.
sitting in jail. So, of course, you look at the nature and circumstances of the case, also the evidence. There's a lot of things you look at. But what the judge said, you know, there's a trial date for March 2024. Was that 8-9 months away or so? And he said, if this does not go to trial by then she's allowed $150K surety bond, and also then should be electrically monitored and on house arrest. I like that he did that.
Well, yeah, that's something that the judge can consider as well. You know, when is the trial date? You know, how long is this individual going to be in custody? You know, obviously there is that presumption of innocence, but judges do look at the facts. You know, it's a lesser in terms of the factors. It's something that's given less consideration than the others that we talked about, particularly the risk of flight and the danger. You know, if we have a trial date that's coming up, a judge may say, well, look, we're talking about something that is really only maybe weeks or months away, depending on the defendant's right to a speedy trial. But really, ultimately, I think judges look at that risk of flight, that danger, and is there some sort of set of conditions that can guarantee that this defendant shows up at trial and doesn't take off.
All right. Stand by, Nima. We do have to take a quick break. Folks, coming up next, reaction from the other side of this case as we hear from the defendant's family. You want to hear this. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, new developments in the Gilgo Beach serial murders. A man suspected of killing at least 4 young women appears in court today. We'll bring you takeaways from today's hearing as we dive deeper into the case. Plus, an alleged DUI crash that tragically took the life of a bride just hours after her wedding. We'll unpack today's bond hearing as we bring in experts to weigh in.
Closing Argument with Vinny Politan tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
The family of Jamie Komoroski also spoke out at today's hearing. Now, they promised to take responsibility for Jamie if she were to be released and to get her some help.
Jamie Komoroski is my daughter. Of course, I would like to offer my plea with the mother and Hutchinson family must be going through. I couldn't even comprehend what that pain must be, and I'm truly sorry for that. Jamie and I were very close. She was a lovely young woman with a big heart. And I know that she will not be an issue if she is released on bond. I would support any and all circumstances that we would place on her. She has actually been in a transformational portion of her life right now. She's becoming very thoughtful, helpful, loving, and understands that her circumstances may be able to help other people with her addiction problems.
And I also want to express my deepest sympathy and sorrow to the family of the Hudsons and the Millers. I'm devastated, and I can't find perhaps the exact words to express my sympathy and sorrow for them. I just want you to know that if you find that Jamie to be bonded, I will take full responsibility and commit myself and dedicate myself to making sure that she will be following all the rules put upon her. And I know that she will not break any rule. And I just want you to know that I will be there and offering my dedication, commitment to help Jamie with her sobriety, to get her to AA meetings, and anything else that she needs to be doing.
I love my sister more than anything in the world. Her heart has no limits. No matter what happened that day, she'd open her arms for a hug. And she'd always be by my side no matter what. And I'm willing to commit myself to making my mission every day to be by her side, to help her through her path of recovery.
My sister Jamie, my family here, we're very closely bonded. I promise we will do everything in our power to help you feel the most comfortable in making a decision today. I have faith that you will do, what is right, and we're here to support that no matter what. Jamie is a kind, loving person who just needs some help.
All right, still with us, former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. Nima, what we're hearing here reminds us that a crime like this, or a situation like this, it devastates both families. But the defendant's family is in a particularly difficult situation because they're not the sympathetic ones, although they feel devastated as well. And we can make all the arguments about, well, their child is still alive and all this other business, but they're in a difficult position. And it's interesting when you hear them speak, how they have to be respectful on one level, but also make sure that they let the court know, our daughter's a good person and we're here. She has a family supporting her.
Well, absolutely, Michael. They have to walk a fine line. You want to be sensitive to the victims. They've lost a loved one. But you also want to make sure that you advocate on behalf of your family member and show that they have a support system in place that can help them, whether it's a mental health issue, depression, or some sort of substance abuse issue, that you have someone that's going to put them in counseling or drive them to and from medical appointments or to court proceedings. Those are things that the judges will look into. Or in some systems, the judges are going to actually want to know who are the sureties, who are the financially responsible people, who are the ones that are going to either put up their money or the house or collateral. Who's going to guarantee that this individual comes to court? And oftentimes they're going to have to show up at these bond or bail hearings and address the court and testify and provide letters and evidence and so forth to convince the judge that, even if you have doubts about this defendant, these individuals are there to support the defendant and make sure that he or she appears in court.
Well, another part of that, though, is they've already said she suffers, as we heard, from the alcohol dependence, the depression and anxiety, and that's part of their plea to say she needs help. They even said she's a kind, loving person who just needs some help. On the other hand, how does it affect her potential defense? Does it interfere with what they may decide as a defense during a course of a trial, if it goes to trial, that they've already put that out there?
Well, it can affect it. That's why if you're the defense attorney, you don't want the defendant herself from testifying, because those statements can be used against her, just like any other admission. And here's a proceeding. It's also former testimony, so it's a non-hearsay. So you have to be very careful. You don't want to, win the battle but lose the war. Now, I'm not saying this is a case that's necessarily going to go to trial. Here's someone that's made some pretty bad admissions already to law enforcement, admitting her level of intoxication. There's going to be chemical tests and so forth. So it may not be the type of case that you want to defend on the merits, but you're absolutely right, Ashley. There are sometimes, as a defense lawyer, you need to wait a little bit. Maybe it's at a bond hearing, maybe it's at a suppression motion, maybe it's even at trial. I mean, I've seen in death penalty cases where, defense lawyers, they want to play it safe, maybe sandbag a little. They think that they're likely going to get convicted at that guilt phase, but they're saving their good evidence and arguments for that penalty phase.
In this case is a little unusual to me, Michael, because I feel like no matter what happens, if she's convicted and sentenced, I don't think it'll be enough for the family of the victims. And on the other hand, no matter what, if she's convicted and sentenced she gets, it's going to be too much from her family's perspective.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's definitely one of those types of cases. And the question I had for you, Nima, was you heard some of the comments from the family members talking about, the choices that she made and adding up to intentional behavior, the idea that she drank to that level, made the decision to get into a car, did these things, and they're a little confused as to why perhaps this wasn't charged as an intentional crime.
Yeah, I hear that a lot where, family members want individuals to be charged with murder, right? And then you're dealing with a manslaughter. Well, murder requires intent. Obviously, first degree requires that specific intent. You intend to kill someone. But, even second degree murder will require at least malice or the depraved heart. So, obviously, we lawyers, we know what that is. But, for lay people, that's sort of the example is, you're shooting into a building. You don't know if someone's going to be there or not. What you're dealing with DUI manslaughter case is recklessness. It's criminal recklessness. It's someone that should be held responsible, but you don't have that intent under the law. I mean, I'd be hard pressed to find someone that's going to say, hey, I'm going to do alcohol or drugs. I'm going to get in a car and I'm going to intend to kill someone, or I don't care if someone dies. It's really that criminal recklessness, and that's why it's a significantly less sentence when you're dealing with involuntary manslaughter. And let's be honest, there's even voluntary manslaughter, which is less than murder, and that's when, the example is you walk in on a loved one and, having an affair with someone else and you just basically in that heat of passion you kill someone, that's even less than murder. So, you know, you're looking at different degrees of homicide, and the law is pretty clear. This is involuntary manslaughter. There's some enhancements and so forth, maybe for use of a vehicle or being under the use of drugs or alcohol, but this is not murder and will never be prosecuted as murder.
It is just a heck of a case. Every time I think about it, I think, it kind of makes me sick to my stomach because there's just no good outcome. But this is the reason for organizations like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, because the reality is when you get in a car drunk, these things can happen. It's not an accident. It's done because of your actions and your behavior. So, you know, you always hear intoxication is not a defense. Intoxication is not a defense. And that rings more true than any other type of charge to me than this one, because intoxication is the reason, I would argue, why this happened, Nima.
Yeah, so voluntary intoxication is not a defense to a crime. However, it can potentially negate the mens rea if you're dealing with a specific intent crime, something that needs to be done purposefully or willfully. So again, it doesn't negate the offense to a general intent crime, something that's done knowingly. So that's one of the distinctions that's there between the voluntary intoxication where you're dealing with a specific intent or a general intent crime.
All right, always great to have you on with us, Nima, to break all this down. And coming up, we're going to bring you more tears from the victim's mother in the case and the message she had after the judge's ruling today. Stay with us. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, new developments in the Gilgo Beach serial murders. A man suspected of killing at least 4 young women appears in court today. We'll bring you takeaways from today's hearing as we dive deeper into the case. Plus, an alleged DUI crash that tragically took the life of a bride just hours after her wedding. We'll unpack today's bond hearing as we bring in experts to weigh in.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
I'm Matt Johnson in New York covering the Long Island serial killer case. This is Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott along with Michael Ayala. Thank you for joining us both today. Jamie Lee Komoroski was denied bond after appearing in court today on charges related to a DUI crash back in April. That crash killed newlywed Samantha Miller and left her husband, Eric Hutchinson, severely injured.
Now, the mother of the bride, Lisa Miller, spoke out along with other family members after the judge's ruling. So let's listen now to their emotional reaction.
If she's been incarcerated for 3 months, she's probably very clean now. And they do have addiction programs in the jails. So she can access that if that's really what she wants. And I don't think that 3 months spending time in jail, 3 months is nothing. I mean, it seems like yesterday for us. And like I was saying in there, we are tore up. I mean, our family is tore up. Eric's family's tore up. Our families are in disaccord. Is that the word? Yeah. Like we're not together on one page anymore. It's just created such havoc in everybody's life. And why should she get out and just go about her merry way? You know. And I definitely don't think she should go to Jersey or anywhere around here. I think she should stay in the community where it happened and feel it like I do every time I come down here. I was here last week. Every golf cart I see. I went over to the marina, and I turned around, and there was the
wedding venue.
The wedding venue. And on the way home in the car, I just all of a sudden broke down and had this major anxiety attack. I didn't know why, because I see those things and I don't say anything, and it's hurtful. And she should have to see them too. That girl rocked this world, okay? She was nothing but, here I go. Love and care. And she literally was like born an angel. She did nothing but want to make people feel good. She couldn't stand when she thought anybody, even a stranger, felt bad, felt sad. It was her job to make them feel better. You know, she's at Bojangles giving the homeless guy biscuits when she's like 7 years old. You know, like that's just who she was. And I want people to know that she was a bride for 3 hours or 4 hours, however the amount was, but she has 34 years of who Sam was. And Sam was an awesome, free spirit, beautiful person inside, and that's what I want people to talk about.
This was a little more difficult with having people around me that I love, even though that sounds like it would be supportive. But knowing how much this has affected our entire family, standing up there and just talking about Sam and what this has done.
Were you pleased with the judge's decision on bond?
I am so happy I could run and scream, and I'm crying happy tears. I'm very happy. I'm happy because I feel like it's been 3 months and the time hasn't been served, and she is a risk of flight and she is a danger to society, and the judge felt that.
And we're also working on planning a service for her in the near future. We kind of wanted to get through, celebration of her life. We're wanting to get through this step for sure, and then maybe have a little bit of time to breathe and be in the right frame of mind to plan that celebration for Sam.
Heartbroken for the family. I have to say, Michael, you know, a lot of it to me wasn't surprising. That 3 years the 3 months she spent in jail is nothing. It just happened yesterday. But then when she said, I think if she got out, she should stay in the community so that she has to see where it happened, just like I do. I thought, well, I hadn't even thought of that point or that perspective of the victim's family.
Yeah, again, when you listen to family members and how they're processing this type of thing, it's always, you know, just devastating to listen to. You know, I mean, this is a family that went from arguably one of the happiest days in the life of a family, right? There's a union going on, and you raise this child, and they're getting married, and then life ends on that day. I can't even imagine what the feeling is like under those circumstances. All you can do, and this is some of the best advice that I've heard under these circumstances, is you try to honor the memory of the person who's dead. You also try to, and she talked about who Sam was, her daughter was, you try to honor what their wishes might have been.
Yeah.
And if she's really a good person and she really treats people the way that she thought, try to honor that as you move forward. And I think that helps the healing process.
And I love the description she gave her and said, remember her, talk about her 34 years of free spirit. And I thought, what a great way to describe her, because that evokes something in me of what she must have been like. But let's talk about the legalities a little bit, because you and I were talking, and I said, you know, it's really hard in a case like this legally, if we just look strictly legally. Arguably, it was a mistake.
Yeah.
She got in a car after drinking. It was a mistake, but with dire consequences. Is that any kind of defense? It was a mistake.
No, because I think the focus has to be on the second part, the dire consequences part. The other part that we've seen many of these cases, and we hear this kind of talk when you're talking about prosecuting a case like this, getting behind the wheel of a car is a deadly weapon. It's a deadly weapon. And we know enough now, and there's been enough education out there in the public that you know when you go out to drink that way, you have a designated driver, you do things the right way so these things don't happen, because there are and can be devastating consequences. Going out and having a good time, no problem with that. But once you get behind the wheel of a car, that is a deadly weapon, and the consequences have to be borne by the person who makes that mistake with dire consequences.
And different factually completely, but you make such a great point. Darrell Brooks, the parade that he drove into, again, the car was the deadly weapon that he chose to get into, and the death and havoc that was wrecked by that. Completely agree with you. So this is a heck of a case that, of course, we're going to continue to cover here on Court TV.
One quick point, difference in the Darrell Brooks case, they found intent there.
Yes.
There was intent.
Very different.
So he was cognizant of what he was doing and did it purposefully.
With that deadly weapon, though.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Good point.
All right.